Good evening, everyone. So welcome to today's video. I'm going to be talking about Islam versus feminism, why it doesn't work. So let's begin. Islam is a way of life in which Muslims both believe and practice. A Muslim, by definition, is described as someone who submits their will to the one and only God, Allah. Islam emphasizes on the idea of community, which can be seen throughout many different forms, such as family, congregational prayers, breaking of the fast during the holy month Ramadan, and so on. The idea of family, however, has its roles to it. For example, a family consists of a father and a mother, both of which have their own role and responsibilities. Islam expresses gender roles and makes it very clear in both the Holy Book, the Quran, and throughout hadiths, sayings collected from the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. It is clear to Muslims around the world what gender means and how it should play out on society as a whole and individually. A role of a man once he has reached the age of puberty in Islam is as follows. Someone who protects the women folk within his family to whom he would be a mahram to, which is a male guardian over a female, i.e., his mother, sister, daughter. Another one of a man's role is to financially provide. A role of a woman in Islam is the following. Someone who obeys her husband and or father, someone who takes care and raises her children, and that is where I ended my essay. So I want to further deepen this discussion, as you will. We have to understand something when we talk about these two subjects, and especially how we need to understand the fundamentals of both of them to understand where each side is coming from and how their certain ideologies affect the outcome of each discussion. So in Islam, Muslims are going to have a certain way of thinking and thought on society and in other areas of life as a whole. And feminism has its own beliefs and history to it, in which feminists will have their own reasonings and beliefs as to what makes feminism good in certain areas and how it should be defined and or redefined even. So we need to understand how each side is viewing the same topics in life, which is gender role in this case. Islam and feminism are going to have different ideologies when it comes to gender role because of the belief as a whole within Islam and feminism, which are, in a sense, polar opposites. We know feminism is not only about women's rights and equality, but rather it's the equality between man and woman. And Islam demolishes that very clearly. And it is very clear that Islam does not offer nor do humans have the ability to make that possible because most feminists, as you will, are going to be non-religious and most of the time non-Muslim. So in that sense, there are a greater amount of feminists who are then going to believe in science as a source or as a foundation in how they perceive the world, etc. So let's talk about science then. How does science play a role in all of this? Well, it's a huge role. And if you know Muslims, you know they also believe in science, though not the same in theory. Rather, we believe God, um, for example, the Big Bang Theory. Most people would not deny that theory, but as Muslims, we would say God made that happen. So, with that being said, how does science play a role in this? Well, feminism has to do with gender role and gender equality, and also it diminishes gender as a whole. Therefore, the idea of equality, how men and women are equal. Now, SNEM makes this very clear. But science, what does science have to do? So, biology. You would know that men and women are both physically different. From a physiological stance, men and women are different. For example, a bone in our body, which is our pelvis, is very different in size and length and structure, as you will. That's just one example. Men have certain body parts, women also have certain body parts in which neither of the two both are the same. Yes, there are some similarities, of course, there is no doubt. But we can't deny that men have X and Y chromosomes and women have X and X chromosomes and deal with certain physical obstacles, as you will. So with that stance, if men and women aren't equal physically, how can then they be mentally, psychologically, and how can we be pushing an agenda in which makes no sense if we're looking at the human itself? If we are all equal, then why are there two genders? Why are there men and women? Why not just be all one gender that all have the same body structure, body function, psychological similarity? Why don't then we have that if we are in fact equal? It doesn't make sense because it's not a thing. Men and women are different, and many feminists understand that men are like this, women are like this, though they can do the same things and get the same opportunity, and that is what they're really pushing and advocating for. But we cannot simply just say we want equality. We need to define what kind of equality, and most feminists will say, equal pay, equal this, equal that. They'll have a list on certain things in which need to be equal. Now, Islam already offers first women's rights. And some of those rights for women in Islam are the right to marry whom they wish, to be able to obtain an education, the ability to own property or land, also the ability to work. And of course, with all these things comes boundaries. And for example, I mentioned jobs. Well, it depends on the job. However, women are still able to work in certain environments. So yes, some things do have some sort of barrier, but just by a whole view on these subjects, we'll just go with that. So Islam already offers this to women. Islam already offers women's rights. Sure, there are some Muslim majority countries in which do not allow for these rights to be fulfilled, but that's a political issue, not an Islamic issue. And it's very hard to differentiate the two, and even culturally as well. But Islam as a whole offers that. Feminists, we saw, especially within the United States, um, why feminism even became a movement, as you will. Well, feminism was, if we're looking back in history, we see women at those times advocating and protesting for the right to vote. This was one of the main movements in which why feminism even became a thing. So they did accomplish that thing that they were advocating and protesting for, which was the ability to vote. But now we have something called the second wave feminism movement. And before I carry on, just as a geographical view on feminism, we see feminism predominantly on the rise and predominantly laid out in majority Western societies rather than the East side of the world, if we're getting geographically. Now, why is that? So that's another interesting point we can discuss and bring up. But feminism is now changing and it's constantly shifting to new demands, as you will. Islam doesn't change. Islam has been the same for over 1400 years. But so furthermore, feminism, like I said, is constantly evolving as societies progress, along with culture even. So this is a problem because feminism is now shifting into something in which, kind of diminishes gender role in societies. And we see this especially with the United States and some parts in Europe where there are more than two genders now, as so people claim there to be. There are even some things in which are no gender, like non-binary. These things are now on the rise. These things were never a thing even just a couple years ago. And we see this with transgender folks as well. Now, why would this not be good, you may ask? Why is this not good? Why can't people have the freedom to choose if they want to be perceived or identify as the opposite gender or no gender at all? And why should there be sort of quote unquote boundary to gender? Now, there are problems with this because, like I said earlier, men and women are not equal, both physically and psychologically. So, if one day someone may choose to become or identify or be perceived as the opposite gender, that doesn't mean they are the opposite gender. Sure, you can dress, you can act, you can look a certain gender, but does that really make you that other gender? Physically, internally, no. And some outer parts even no. Now, the danger to transgenderism and non-binaryism and so on and so forth is that it demolishes gender role and applies it towards the opposite, because someone has to play a certain role. Whether you think you do or not, everyone has a certain role. And someone has to fulfill these roles. Someone has to go out and provide. Someone has to stay home and raise their children. Someone's going to have to do one of these roles at some point in their life if you're already not doing it. And we see specifically Western societies advocating for specifically women to no longer be stay-at-home mothers and or wives. Rather, they are advocating and pushing the narrative that you can be an independent, empowered, strong woman who doesn't need a man or have children. And this is harmful. Why is it harmful? Well, why are women, or I should say, what is a woman's role? What is something in which she would both be fulfilled in life, happy, and successful in? Not a career. And we even hear from a Christian man called uh, Jordan, Jordan, I think it was Jordan Peterson. He even talks about the shift in which women have. When girls are young adults, specifically 18 to 19, they think career wise, what they want to do, what they want to be, and then they go for it. Then women reach the age 30, for example. And all of a sudden, that whole career idea that the same girl had when she was just a couple years younger, it automatically just shifts into now wanting a family, wanting to be a mother, wanting to settle down, wanting to get married. And we see time and time again that why are women having this role of so-called stay-at-home moms in the first place? Why do women need to stay at home and not men? Why not the father stay at home? Well, first, women get pregnant, men don't. So a mother and the child is already having a physical connection, and mothers also produce breast milk, in which babies need this milk to get nourishment. And we even seeing that being taken away from motherhood. Rather, now we are shifting into formula, and it's being pushed on women to no longer breastfeed, rather to use formula. Now, I understand some women may have problems and issues in producing breast milk. I understand that. I'm not disregarding that, nor am I trying to be disrespectful towards those women. This is something that does happen for some women, and therefore they would need a formula to feed their babies, but not all women. Most women produce it just fine. Sure, there may be struggles, but you can still get the job done and accomplished. And it creates this bond between mother and child, which is something unbeatable in a mother's eyes. And we even push pregnant women into working. They don't even stop working until they are like a month into getting ready to give birth. This is another absurd phenomenon that we are facing and putting upon the women in our societies. It is unreasonable and unmanageable. Not only that, it is stressful for women to work 40 hours a week, be stressed out from that, and on top of that, be dealing with hormonal and bodily changes. And right when she gives birth, sure, she can take a few months, if she can, from work off, and then be put back into the workforce. We are pushing women so much that now women are not thinking to have kids, be a wife. Women my age and younger are no longer thinking this. So, what does that mean? Of course, the population is going to decrease. Now, I'm not saying a woman's only job in the world is just to give birth and do nothing else. No, I'm not saying that. But if we compare women who work and have no family of their own in comparison to stay-at-home mothers, we can see the satisfaction and fulfillment from both sides, and that being the stay-at-home mother being more satisfied in her life from being that stay-at-home mother in comparison to a woman who has no family of her own who works. Women are made for this role, hence the reason why they can get pregnant and not men. If it was men to get pregnant, then yes, men should stay at home then, and women should be the ones going out and working, but that's not the case, is it? I would like to also mention that women go through a lot of physical change, and with that, we see women lose eggs over time. So they can't just have a baby at any age. They have a time limit, unlike men who don't per se have that. So we are pushing young females, predominantly young females, to just focus on their career and education, which doesn't make sense because, like I said, women have a time span. So even if she wanted to have kids one day, it might already be too late.